Hello, good evening, and welcome to our virtual presentation of 6 Weeks to Live with author Catherine McKenzie and Rachel Stuhler. We have signed book plates available upon request. To receive one, click on the green purchase button. It will take you to our website. And when you are checking out your cart, please write signed book plate in the order comments so that we can get the signed book plates for you. Also, this event includes an audience Q&A. To submit a question, use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like for our guests to answer, and they'll make their way to the very top of the list. All right, with that said, let me briefly introduce our speakers, and then we can get started. So Catherine McKenzie practiced law for 20 years before leaving the practice to write full-time. An avid runner, skier, and tennis player, she's the author of numerous bestsellers, including Hidden, Fractured, The Good Liar, and I'll Never Tell. 3 of her books have been optioned for development into TV series. And joining her tonight is Rachel Stuhler. She has written several TV movies for Lifetime and the Hallmark Channel, and is the author of Absolutely True Lies. Her byline has appeared in publications from Cosmopolitan to Newsweek. All right, so let me bring them up to full screen.
Hello.
Hi. Enjoy the talk, everyone.
Thanks. So I think it's so funny, and we'll tell the story of how we met. Like which is very funny. Which is very funny, we think, anyway. And but you know, when I asked Rachel to do this event, like I don't know, 3 months ago or something. And it didn't even occur to me that I would be not in Montreal, which is where I normally am.
Or that we'd be vaccinated.
Or that we'd be vaccinated or in a room together without masks, you know, all that stuff. And so we set this date, and it was just like a date on the calendar. And then life evolved, and my sister has moved to California, and I got vaccinated, and I was able to come out here, and I decided to do a very LA thing, which was the week taking meetings in Los Angeles. And I realized that we were both I was going to be in LA where Rachel lives for this book event. So I was like, hey, let's do it in the same place. And so we just met like in person for the first time downstairs.
Which is funny because we've been chatting for 6 months.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, obviously we don't need there's already a shorthand there, but it's very funny to just say hi, let's go do an event together.
Yeah, like hello, how are you? So I've told the version of how we met on one of our meetings this week. So why don't you tell the version?
Okay. So Catherine and I follow each other on Twitter, and we have for a long time, and I'm a big fan of hers, and I have been for a long time. And she reached out to me and she said, hey, I have this idea for a rom-com. Do you want to talk about it? And I actually even clicked on it to make sure it was really you. Because I thought,
troll.
Yes, I thought to myself, you never know, it's the internet. So we agreed to talk on the phone, and we just sort of hit it off when we seemed to bounce off each other very well.
Agree.
And we started talking at the beginning of December, and then we were writing a script together that is now up for sale over Christmas break. And it worked up so quickly, it's almost unbelievable. But we've been conversing this entire time, and we've sort of built this working relationship, friendship, and somehow it has all brought us to a hotel room a week after we're
Santa Monica.
In Santa Monica after we're both vaccinated.
Right. So. That's so 2021, I feel.
Well,
and the funny thing for me was, and I'm a fan of Rachel's too, and if you guys are looking for like a great end of COVID fun read, Absolutely True Lies is a real blast. But I got this idea for a rom-com, and I always there's a couple of writers on here I know, but writing a book is a lonely experience, right? You're like alone with your fake people. And sometimes people talk to you and you don't hear them because you're up in your head writing dialogue or whatever. And, but it's really fun to collaborate, I think, with people. And so I had this idea, and I was like, you know what? I like Rachel. Like, I think you're very good at translating your personality online.
Yes,
like
I try to be.
No, but you know, I think I often meet people and they're like, "You're so different in person than I thought you were going to be." And I never know if that's a compliment or an insult. But anyway. But I feel like you translate it very well. And so I was like, I feel like she would be the right person to reach out. And when I did not tell her what this movie was going to be about. And so then I had 2 days of like weird date anxiety, basically. Like, oh my God, I'm going to pitch this thing to her and there's going to be silence on the other end of the line. She's going to be like, great, well, it was nice talking to you. Click.
Good luck to you.
Good luck to you with this idea. But that isn't how it went. And we've written a TV show since then too, yes. Right? So, which will hopefully soon be for sale.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
I read at the beginning of the pandemic, I'll Never Tell. And I had read most of your earlier ones, but that was one that, you know, when you get on your TBR it's really deep when you just, you see a bunch of things you want to buy.
Yes.
And so it was fresh in my mind when you called.
Okay. That's so funny. Right.
And the other thing is like, I because I had read it not so long ago, I felt like I had a really clear idea of your writing style and the way that you work.
Right.
And one of my favorite things about you is that you write things that are really suspenseful and really interesting and really, you can really sink your teeth into them, but the language itself is so accessible.
Thank you. Yeah, I do try and do that. I am trying to, you know, I remember at the beginning of my career, when my first book, Spin, came out, one of the first reader emails that I got, or, you know, email, tweet, something, was like, oh, I read this in one sitting. And I was horrified because I was like, that thing I worked on for 2 years, you read it in 4 hours? Like, yeah. Thank God I slaved over each sentence. But I really take it as a compliment now. That is what I want to do, because I don't know about you, but I still am trying to get back to when I was in high school and I could get just lost in a book.
Yes. And I think that's what that person was saying. And that is the way you write, is that my husband laughs at me all the time because I say, if the words don't disappear for me in the first 5 pages, then I'm probably not into the book and I might need to set it down and try again.
Right.
But yours are, I feel like the page disappears inside the first page or so.
Awesome.
And that is a huge thing. And I can see how even people who don't normally consume massive amounts of books could sort of inhale.
Right.
What you're putting out there.
I mean, I think one of the things I think as a writer that's important to do is not throw people out of the story. So that is what I'm looking for when I read something, like what is going to throw somebody out of the story. And it might be a big word that somebody doesn't know, or an expression that people don't know. I think I had a draft of a book once where I used the word toque, which is the French word for hat. And the copywriter thankfully caught that and was like, I don't know what this word is. I'm like, oh, whoops. You know? So, but I do think you can still write at a high level in a simple way. Like I had a law mentor who was a great legal writer, and he really was about keeping things simple. Like lawyers tend to overcomplicate and use the word thus and unbeknownst and thereto, therefore, you hear heretofore, above mentioned, whatever. And it can get really heavy and pretentious. And I think, I think it's actually an art to convey complex thoughts with simple language.
Absolutely.
So I am trying to do that. Though I end up overusing phrases. I don't know about you, but I'm finding now I can't get people to do things anymore because I feel like I've written it already. Like, he looked at him, he tilted his head, he nodded, you know?
Yes.
Right.
But those are also things that are part of our vernacular in everyday life.
I know.
So I think they would just naturally disappear. Certainly everybody overuses phrases.
Yes.
If anybody who knows you well will be able to point out either in your writing or in person and say, no, you always say that.
That's true.
That's just who we are. And that's what copy editors are for.
100%. And I do have a growing list of words. Do you have this where I search at the end?
Yes.
So I have like just, and I think I actually did it on Twitter and a bunch of writers added to it. So my little last thing I do before I send it off to the copy edit is I literally do a word search for and phrases, a little, but just.
Do you have any like random phrases that are particular to you that wouldn't be overused by other people?
Yeah, I think, and I just kind of realized that I did. So because I have a million projects on the go right now. Now that I don't practice law, I have all this time. And I'm working on a rom-com book. And there's a scene with the phrase that ends with, "I didn't see it coming." And when I wrote it, I was like, this seems so familiar to me. Like, why? And then I found myself rereading Spin, and that is the end line in like the third chapter. So I'm like, I'm plagiarizing myself at this point.
I tend to use, and it's taken a couple people to point this out to me, I use light speed or speed of light to describe things. And I think it's now 3 movies and a book. So I have now, if I catch it's a thing I say in real life.
Right.
Because I'm a very metaphorical speaker. If I can't think of how to translate something, I will come up with something visual to make you think of it. And I have been told I need to stop using speed of light.
Well, I also more than once used, I guess it's a metaphor of, that thing of like a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, it can cause a hurricane. And I spun out that metaphor in 2 different ways in 2 different books. And my sister reads everything I write. And she was like reading the second one. She's like, FYI, you use the same analogy and / metaphor, whatever, in your last book. And I was like, oh, but I like how I've done it in this one. Like, I get it, but who's reading it that carefully? So, but I can't do that. I also have at least 3 books with characters named Kate, spelled Kate, at least 3. I'll never tell there's one. It's the main character in Spin. And then I can't even remember what the third one is. But I tend to gravitate towards the same names sometimes, or I'll get stuck on a letter. So I'll realize that like all my characters have J names, and it's like, this in Hidden never even got picked up by anybody. And I realized years later, I have a character named Beth and a character named Seth in the same family. No, nobody caught that. Nobody caught that. And and these are the things I think, I don't know about you, but it drives writers crazy. I don't think readers notice these things.
I don't, as somebody who also writes TV movies, names are the bane of my existence.
Right.
Because I sometimes have to come up with 30 to 45 names in a year. Mm-hmm. And these, especially the TV movies, re-air again and again. And so I have made jokes in the past that I'm going to start naming people like Light Bulb and Lampshade because I have run out of everything at this point.
Yeah. Well, my joke about that was I was going to get my sister to literally make a Bible of names Catherine McKenzie has used in her books.
That's a great idea.
Right. But what I do now is I pick a year the character is born, and then I will go look baby names that are popular in that year. And then I won't take the top name. I feel like if you go down to like 25, 30.
See, I go down to 100.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But I do.
But then you end up with Light Bulb. But there's some weird names down there in the 30, 40th
really
position.
are.
And I'm like, really? There's enough people in this country who named their kid whatever it was that year. So I was actually looking at that the other day, and I of course the names have escaped me now because they were just so bizarre. But I was like, really? There's a bunch of kids running around with that name? Okay. All right. I know I'm Catherine. It's like the most basic, literally the most basic name you can have. So yet it gets misspelled constantly.
My name Rachel gets misspelled all the time. Somebody
really?
Oh yes. Somebody once wrote on my cup at Starbucks, RHEYTCHUL. And I thought,
that's crazy.
That's interesting. I wanted to go back in and ask the person, have you met someone whose name is spelled this way?
That's very weird. I think I did well with naming, not to bring it to my book, but there are triplets in 6 Weeks to Live, and I think I did well with naming the triplets because one is Emily, one is Aileen, and then one is Miranda, which are just to me completely different names. And I knew I needed them to have different personalities, which is hard when there's 3 women in the same family at the same age. And so I was like, I need to work hard on the names because I felt like the names would anchor their personalities.
I'm curious to know what brought you to triplets.
So I actually know somebody. So the triplets in this book are a set of identical twins and a fraternal. so they're triplets, but they're also twins. And I actually know somebody who has triplets like that. They're 8 years old, and they're not, the characters in this book are not based on them. But when I met her and her triplets were like 3, I was fascinated with this possibility. And I just think it's so interesting in families. I can't remember. Are you you're an only child, or you have half siblings?
Yes, I grew up as an only child. Yeah.
So I'm one of 3, and there's a 7-year age gap between us, and stories will get told. We were all there, and we have completely different memories of what happened, totally different perceptions of what our parents were like. Some are the same, but others are different. And I just always found that fascinating. And when I learned about these triplets, and I think I kind of knew that was a possibility, but hadn't really thought about putting it in a book. I just thought such an interesting idea to explore in a novel, because there's both the dynamics of they're triplets, but everyone thinks they're twins, and there's a built-in outsider, and they don't look like the twins are identical, so they look alike, but the third one doesn't. They take after different parents, and so their coloring is very different. And so I wanted to explore that, and I wanted to explore how people in a family can just have this completely different experience of growing up, even though they all had the same experience.
It's really interesting because when you talk about it, it comes across as so complicated, but it's such in the book, it doesn't, right. It is a family complication, but it doesn't read as complicated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I have themes I want to explore in every book that I write, but I don't want to beat anybody over the head with those themes. So they'll come up, they're good for book clubs. And if you want, what I hope my books are working on 2 levels is if you want to have deep thoughts about a novel, the deep thoughts are there to have, or if you just want to read something that will entertain you, hopefully that it does that as well.
Are there any other themes that you went for this
time? Yeah. So one of the other things in here, so the main character, Jennifer, who has been given this diagnosis of 6 weeks to live, is separated but not yet divorced. And you're a bit younger than me, but in the 40s, the divorces.
It's just started.
Right.
Yes. Okay. In my world, it's just started. Yes.
So the divorces start, and they did not go. To the extent that I ever thought about how my friends' divorces would go, they just didn't necessarily go the way I thought that they would in various different ways. And one of the things that has really struck me is how we have these expectations of people now in divorce and how they're supposed to behave. And it's just so bizarre to me. So think back to your worst relationship in your life, who's the first person who broke your heart in high school or whatever, or who cheated on you, or you probably never talk to that person again, right? And no one would judge you for it.
Right.
But when there's kids involved, and particularly on women, I think, all this pressure is there to Gwyneth Paltrow, you're divorced.
To co-parent.
And
be friendly. And
and be friendly and do holidays together. And you're I hate that person. That person made my life. And sometimes that's not the case, and that's great. I'm always surprised, why'd you get divorced if you're still friends and you like each other? But whatever, that's another story. But yeah, all this pressure gets put on people, and if you don't live up to that, it's well, you're not acting in the best interest of your kids, and I think that's kind of dehumanizes people, and I feel those expectations get put on women in a way that they don't in men. So it is a theme. Again, I'm not beating anyone over the head with this theme, but it is a theme that I explore in the book, because Jennifer is in a contentious divorce, and she's she's not over it, and she's kind of okay with that, she's not going to forgive him before she dies. And I'm not spoiling the plot or anything.
Well, it's called 6 Weeks to Live.
6 weeks to live, right? Yes.
You can see where it's headed.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting, that, and I loved that, the fact that she is not over it, because I'm very lucky in my relationship, and hopefully will continue to be for the rest of my life. But it's so interesting to watch people reach the end of these relationships where you're face to face with somebody who doesn't look at all like the person you thought you fell in love with.
Right. Well, and I think, I never did family law. And the reason I didn't do that is because I just found it so depressing that this person you used to love, now you hate them and you don't want to see them anymore, and you're fighting over property. But I also think that it's very human, because it's those people that know us the best that are are the most capable of hurting us, right? And so,
Absolutely.
You know, somebody that I don't know can say something annoying to me, and I might be annoyed, but I'm not going to think about it again. But if the same exact thing was said to me by a close friend, I might ruminate about it for years, you know? So I think, I think that is something to explore. And then I like subverting the way women are portrayed in books, and not like just doing the opposite. You know, like often I assign roles for women in books that men often, and we've talked about this.
Yes. And that was actually the next thing I was going to bring up. That's one of the reasons that I gravitated towards your writing right away, is that you have a great way of seeing women in a way that I feel like a lot of other writers, even female writers, don't always do. Like we sometimes fall into these stereotypes of who women can be, and you don't do that. And not only don't you do that, it feels like there's a real effort behind your words to make sure that
it's definitely deliberate. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I even in the script that we wrote a romantic comedy together, and so obviously it's a genre and there are tropes in genres, but I think we did subvert them. Like, you know, the woman is complicated and has issues, and the romantic lead is like a very simple guy who most scripts, that is how the woman would be written, I think. And I like that, you know.
I like yes, we both, I think that is one of the reasons we both work well together. And there is something fantastic about being able to, and feeling free to write the complicated woman who you also do find likable, and you also do identify with them, because we've all in this business heard the notes about men you can have the unlikable rogue who everybody still roots for, but for women, please don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah. And, you know, I like, it's become a trope to say like the unlikable. And my answer to that is always like, okay, so let's unpack this. Let's look at Mad Men. Like, think about the first episode. If you haven't seen it, sorry, I'm going to spoil it for you. In the first episode of Mad Men, you meet this very charming, very handsome, can sell you ice to Eskimo kind of guy, you know, whatever. And you think he has a girlfriend, and it turns out he's cheating on his wife. And you learn that in the first episode. And he is a bad guy. Don Draper is not a good man.
At any point in the
show, he just gets worse. Breaking Bad, same thing. You know, The Sopranos. And I think Breaking Bad is a great example, because his wife, who was just asking normal questions when he's doing these insane things, people hated her, right? Yeah. And so what I think, though, is like it's about charisma and someone being compelling, that you want to know what happens to them, even if you despise their choices. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is like, I don't actually care if you like the people in my books. They're not real people, and they're not going to be your friends. You know? But I do care very much that there are people that you want to know what happened to them, you know. And there's this thing in because it's so easy to cheat, I think. So there's a thing in screenwriting, the famous screenwriting book called Save the Cat. And everybody who gets into screenwriting, it's like, you have to read Save the Cat, and it takes the 6 kinds of scripts there are out there and breaks them down, and here are the beats and all this stuff. And it's a good book. It's very helpful. But the point about Save the Cat is, at the beginning of when the first 10 pages of your manuscript or your script, and hopefully in the first 5, you have to have your main character do something, like literally save a cat in a tree or help a child. And if you do that, the audience will stay with you no matter what that person does until the end.
You need to invest them in your character before you can move on to setting up the crux of the rest of your screenplay.
And I think that's true, but I also think it's lazy, because it's so easy to put that little moment in a book. And I think it's more challenging as a writer to not use the crutch of a save the cat moment, and then hopefully still make the character compelling enough that people want to know what happens to them. Again, even if they're watching the car crash of their life, right?
You can't look away.
You can't look away, because, I mean, it's a thriller. Like, bad things are going to happen. People are going to make bad choices. Or what are you reading about? Because if it was just about my day to day, I walked to my tennis lesson, and then I played tennis, and then I walked back from my tennis lesson. I got some sushi from Whole Foods. Like, I had a good day, but it's not interesting to read about, right?
I'm curious, as a person who, I don't generally work on a lot of thriller stuff.
Right.
I'm curious to know, do you start with the character, or is there a turn in your head that you then apply to? Do you start with that, or do you start with the people?
I start with story. So it's always the concept that comes to me. And then once I have the premise and I know where that premise goes, because I need to know the end of the premise, then I start thinking about, okay, well, who could this happen to? Like, who would this make sense to be in this premise? And then the main character will come to me first. And then I often just start writing when I get the voice of that main character. And I spend the first third of a novel working out who that person is, but then who is everyone else in the world. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I feel like people just kind of show up on the page.
Yes, they introduce themselves.
Yeah, they start talking and you're like, oh, who's this? You know, like, and what's their name and how old are they and what do they look like? And that's the fun alchemy of
writing is socially sanctioned schizophrenia in some ways. That there are people who become really good friends of yours.
Yeah.
And
voices in your head.
Voices in your head, yes. And even when you're not actively working on them, they're still talking to you. Even when it's been a couple of years and it's done, sometimes you might think about the things that what they might be doing right now.
Yeah. I'm not that person. So for me, I know a lot of writers are. Like, I know people who can't let go of their characters, who are still obsessed with books they wrote like 5-6 years ago. For me, I know a book is done when I am not interested in them anymore.
That makes sense.
I've answered all the questions that I had about those characters. It doesn't necessarily mean that I've answered every single question a reader might have about those characters, because I do tie up my books, but I don't necessarily put everything into a neat little bow. And so that's how I know it's done. If I'm not still thinking about the story, so I'm in deep into what are called line edits with my editors for next book. And I'm still, because they're asking good questions. So I'm still like, oh, I got to go back and fix this thing. When I'm still doing that, the book is not ready yet.
See, I have a problem at that stage.
Okay.
I can come back and love them at the end, but at that stage, suddenly everything I've written is so familiar, it looks like a different language to me.
Right. It's like saying the word moist over and over again or something. Right?
Where I can read the same 7 lines and think this doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Right.
So that's impressive that you're still in it.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I go through, to your point, I've often described writing books as a process of breaking down joy.
Accurate.
Right. But because, I wrote 6 Weeks to Live and have read it 10, 15 times. And it's I'm proud of the book, but it's not interesting to me to read it anymore because I know what happens on every page. There are no, I never turn the page ooh, there's a good line. Didn't see that twist coming, right?
But if you went back to say Spin.
Yeah.
Could you read it with fresh eyes and see some passages and think, oh, that's actually pretty good?
Yeah, no, and I did. So I was rereading Spin, and I also reread part of Hidden recently. And I actually think I've reread Spin more recently than Hidden. So Hidden really almost felt like I know I wrote it and I knew everything that happened, but it felt that I actually was a little surprised. It felt new. It felt newer to me, and kind of in the way if you go find a paper you wrote in college or something where you're like, oh, I wrote this, cool. I have no memory of doing that, but awesome, But yeah, I can look back and not be critical, but I think, of course, there's always something you could change. But I think what I try not to do to myself is I'm just trying to write the best book I can in the moment that I'm writing it and do the best I can with that story. It doesn't mean every book is going to be the best book that I've ever written. And I won't say what I think is my best book or whatever, but I can say that it is the best I could do in that moment with that story. That's what I'm hoping, and I think that allows me to sort of let go and move on to the next thing, because it's if I'd written this book at a different time in my life, it would have come out completely differently. From soup to nuts, probably, including character names. Right. But yeah, I think you can torture yourself too, and you can spend too much time going over something. Like it can feel like you're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, you know?
So if you write a book a year,
yeah.
When were you writing 6 Weeks to Live?
So I started writing that in October 2019, and I handed it in the first week of March 2020. Yeah, thank God. I mean, I had to do edits during the pandemic, but
Was it hard to work on something dark during the pandemic, especially at the beginning?
You know what? I handed it in, and then thankfully it was like, it takes, 6 or 8 weeks to get comments back from my editor. So I was just happy I didn't have to finish that first 4 or 5 months of the pandemic. I wrote no new words. I edited the book, but I will say that I'm not sure I edited at that stage as closely as I should have. And then I knew I was kind of phoning it in. And when we got to the last edit, I was like, I need to buckle down and do this properly, because I wasn't able to concentrate before then. And so I did, and I'm happy with the product. But yeah, it was, I mean, just like for everyone, it was definitely different. And I was so glad that I wasn't starting something new. And then I stopped practicing law in August. And again, I basically didn't spend the summer writing. I thought about what my next book would be, and I think I had to write a few sample pages or something to sell it. But I sat down, I wrapped up my law career. I rented a cottage with a friend, went away for a week, didn't write, which is like the first time I've not written on vacation, 15 years or something. And then I sat down fresh in September with no job or only one job. And I was able to like get back into writing, which was good, And I did get a workspace out of my house, because my house was starting to feel like a cell, as I'm sure everyone is.
I think we can all identify
with that feeling, right? And literally it's around the corner from my house, and I have my own door, and so that it was safe and everything. But I was just like, yeah, I do need to do this for me, just to get a break and to write. But I was able to do that. Yeah. So so lucky. I remember handing that in and then being like, thank God I pushed myself to get that done.
When you pitch new books, do you have like an idea file, or is it just once you finish one, you think about the next and then you pitch it? And
I think both, honestly. I have an idea file, but I often end up then coming up with a new concept, because if it sits too long in the idea file, it can start to feel stale. So I have a novel that I still love, but I have like the first third of it sitting parked, but it's just in a completely different genre. And every once in a while I read that first 30,000 words and I'm like, I like this book, damn it, I should finish it. But I don't. Sometimes a new idea will come while I'm writing the other book, and that pushes me to finish it, because it's like the new characters want to talk to me.
They want to come in, they're not.
And and I'm like, okay, you just wait over here, and I will start writing things down in a document with stuff like that. But I found over the years that I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing and coming back to things, because when you do a book a year, like I've been doing for a long time now, really means you're doing 2 books at once, always. Right. And so it's like start and stop. So I have, 50 or 60 pages for 2 years from now book. I had to put that aside because I got back an edit, and I had to re-immerse myself in next year's book. And then I'll have to go back and reread that 50 or 60 pages just to get back into the voice and the characters and stuff.
In addition to the screenplays.
Right. And a rom-com and blah, blah, blah. So, I know I sound like a crazy person.
No, I think it's pretty, I always prefer to be working on 3 or 4 things at a time, because sometimes it depends on the mood you're in.
Definitely.
There are outlets for moods, and you can compartmentalize those into what you're working on at any given time. Yeah.
Well, and it's why I wanted to write a rom-com, because living in thrillers is a dark place.
Especially during the pandemic. Yeah. And I wanted something lighter and fun. And I started off writing lighter, like I still think emotionally complex books, but just like lighter, funnier. And I wanted to return back to that space.
It's funny though about work ethic, you know, one of the ways that I knew that we would work well together was like, it's so hard to find someone who writes the same rhythm that you do. And because normally we have a time change, you know, like a 3-hour time difference, it actually works pretty well because my productive time is the morning. So like I can write it and then I can send it
mine's
to
at
you.
Night,
right. It's
after the kids go to bed.
Right.
So it just, yeah.
It works perfectly. And then I'd wake up the next morning and I'd have the pages back and it's like, great, you know, let's go. That's how we wrote a whole script in 10 days over the Christmas holiday.
And hopefully if my children ever go back to school, that is how
Good Lord.
we will continue writing things.
If you want to like watch a tragicomedy, you need to follow Rachel on Twitter because crazy things happen to you. Like the other day, a rock flew into her car and like
hit me in the neck.
Yeah. Like,
I don't know. I don't think the things that happen to me are that crazy. I think I just talk about them.
That's possible, but you talk about them in a funny, entertaining way. So, and I felt like I knew your kids. You know, I still haven't met your kids, but I felt like I knew your kids. Like,
yeah, my kids have big personalities. I don't know why. And I just and I do talk about them a lot on Twitter because I think they're funny.
They are funny. They say funny things. I mean, lots of kids say funny things.
Yeah, it's a particularly great age, I think, between like 3 and 10.
Yes.
Before they get the filter, when anything that comes out of their mouth is just comedy gold.
Yeah. The other day I spoke to my 10-year-old nephew. I have 2 10-year-old nephews, so I'll give him a little bit of anonymity from different sisters on different sides of the family. But he's been watching a lot of Star Trek or Star Wars, and I think he's taken the wrong lesson from it. He somehow thinks that empires are a good thing. And it's better to have a king than to have democracy because then at least people aren't fighting over who should win elections. I was like, buddy,
Kylo Ren is not the good guy here.
Well, that was what I was saying. It started because he was wearing a Darth Vader robe when he answered the phone. And I think I came up with a good analogy. I was like, okay, let's put it this way. Your mom and dad could make your decisions for you for the rest of your life, and your life might turn out better. Or you can make your own decisions, but your life, you might screw up. Which one do you want? And he was like, I want to make my own decisions. I'm like, yes, democracy.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
But he's 10, so I don't share it. Anyway, I'm going to be seeing him soon, and we need to work on his like love of
the bad guy or the good guy.
Apparently the Empire was just trying to make everyone happy. Again, I don't think that's the lesson of Star Wars, but
my 4-year-old is way more interested in the villains, and he always tells me they're more fun, Mom.
They are more fun. That's
the
true.
Good guy. He's like, the good guys are always in trouble.
Because the bad guy is causing trouble for them, right? Yeah. All right, we got some questions. Why don't we look at those? From Heather, who writes awesome thrillers if you're looking for some good reads. I love how fast-paced and twisty your books are, and I read 6 Weeks to Live in 24 hours. See, I take that as a compliment. Thank you, Heather. Did you plot out the novel or just start writing? How did you come up with this idea? How did I come up with the idea? Or like I'm start at the wrong part of the question. So I do think of the plot beforehand. I'm not a big plotter. I'm a pantster, which means that what that really means is I don't have detailed outlines, except for when I work on projects with other people before I start writing. But I do need to know the who done it, the why done it, the how done it before I start. And it sometimes evolves over the course of the book, but it never totally changed who did it. You know, I often get asked that question. And this particular book did actually get inspired by, it's dedicated to someone in my extended family who got a tragic diagnosis before the pandemic. And it just got me thinking about what would you do if you had a clock put on your life, you know? And how would you spend your time? And I watched how she was spending her time and what was important to her, which was completely different than what would be important to me. And that just got me sort of thinking about that. And then I love the movie DOA, the remake that was in the 80s, which I apparently have seen many more times than I thought, because I recently rewatched it to write an article. And I knew all the dialogue, and my husband was like, what the hell? How many times did you watch this movie? I'm like, I'm sorry, Dennis Quaid was cute in the 80s. So I think I just fused the ideas and went from there. And for the record, I would go to the beach with a pitcher of margaritas. I would not spend the last 6 weeks of my life trying to figure out who tried to kill me. But, you know, it's
to each their own.
To each their own. It makes for a good book, right? Tell us more about your novel and your motivation. So, yeah, the novel is about a woman who finds out that she should have said like half an hour ago, but it's fine. It's about a woman who finds out that she has 6 weeks to live, but also that she might have been poisoned a year earlier. And she decides to spend her last 6 weeks on Earth trying to figure out who that was. It's not the husband. There's my spoiler. But you knew it wasn't the husband, right? First of all, somebody already wrote that brilliant book with that brilliant title. So, yeah. I'm new to your books, Catherine. Are all your titles standalone stories or have some characters appeared in more than one? So in general, yes, my books are standalone. When I was writing romantic comedies, I had little cameos or like people be mentioned from my other books. So my first book, Spin, is about a journalist who follows the celebrity into rehab, and the celebrity's named Amber Shepherd. And in either my book Arranged or Forgotten, I can't remember which, I mentioned Amber Shepherd. I think it wasn't Arranged. And the I get my copy edit back, and the copy editor's like, I spent hours trying to find a celebrity named Amber Shepherd. Are you sure this is how her name is spelled? And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's a fictional person from one of my other books. Fast forward, so my books came out in Canada before the US. Fast forward 2 years later, I've completely forgotten about this. Arranged is going through a copy edit, and I got asked the same question again by the copy editor, and I was like, oh my God, I'm terrible. So I think I did in the book that I'm working on now, I did mention somebody from I'm trying to even think now what I have to go back. But so long story short, standalones, but Spin does have a sequel that's a novella that follows a different character from the book. Yours are all standalones, right?
Yes, but I also do Easter eggs. I reference things that, and mostly it's for me, just because they're connected in my head.
Yeah, no, I get that. How different is my writing process when you're writing a novel as opposed to a script? You know, I come out mostly dialogue when I'm writing my novels in the first draft, and I have to go back and add the prose. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's actually not that different, honestly, to write scripts. I actually find I have to write less prose because there's not that much prose in scripts. And do you know Zoe Whitall? Do you know?
Yes.
Yes, from Twitter. She's
Yes.
a Canadian writer who also writes for TV, and she actually put on Twitter maybe 2 months ago, she's like, I always know when I'm reading a script by a novelist. And I'm like, yeah, because there's probably too much prose in there, you know? So I don't think it's that different. I think the output, and my output is kind of the same. I can do like 10 pages of a novel, and then I could do 10 pages of script.
And I will say, as a person who's worked with Catherine on a script, one of the things that blew me away immediately, I am very much a dialogue person. Like, I am known for my really snappy dialogue. I have never seen anybody with a better command of plot and structure than Catherine.
Aww.
The way that, and I'm not bad at it, but I have to shape it. I have to, it's, you know, it's like pottery where I look at it a couple of times and I change things.
Right.
And she has an amazing ability to like look at just the blank pottery wheel and think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it works.
Thank you. So far, I think it is because I see the whole thing in my head beginning to
Right.
end before I start. I think that's why. I think if I've occasionally gotten lost in a book, and it's always because I started writing before I knew the end. And then it's like, oh, nope, whoops, this book doesn't make any sense. So I think that helps. If I had 6 weeks to live, what would be on your bucket list?
That would be hard. I don't know. It's completely different now that I have kids.
Right.
And I will admit, I had a little bit of, it was a little bit hard for me to start the book because of that.
I get it.
And I had to separate it and think these kids are older. And
Right.
so it would be with my kids. But also, I think I agree with your margaritas on the beach. You want to see as many sunsets and put your toes in the sand.
Well, so I asked this question online, and I got really fascinating answers. One of which I wish I had incorporated into the book, but it was too late. So a lot of people said they would write letters to people, and which I would not do. But I was like, that would have been cool in the book if she had been writing hate mail to her ex-husband. But yeah, so a lot of people said that. And the other really interesting answer that I liked was that a lot of people said that they would go skydiving or do something they were afraid to do, because it doesn't matter if you're going to die anyway, Still,
so if you accidentally die skydiving, that would suck. Awful.
Well, I'm still not jumping out of a plane. I don't care. But, and then, a lot of spend time with friends and family, obviously. But I think for me, I would be like, I'm not going to put any effort into this. This is where I'll be if you want to come find me, Yeah. Yeah. But different people have different things. Some people, it's like really important to them to for their things to be organized and their affairs in order. And I will say is a maybe slightly sober moment is it's, if you had to pick an amount of time to be told, it's not that bad an amount of time, because it does give you that time to say your goodbyes and but you're not,
it's not too long.
It's not too long. You're not lingering. You're not in pain for too long. Hopefully you're not, you're not being tortured. Obviously it all sucks. And it was very sad, but it did seem she was at, the person I know this happened to, she was at peace. I think she had enough time to do and say the things she wanted to do and have the conversation she wanted to have, which was nice to see. So that's my depressing moment there. Excuse me. Somebody said,
I think we have time for one more.
To be the culprit. What scripts have I written that have been filmed? None. But Rachel has definitely written some scripts that have been filmed.
Yes. I have had 13 scripts produced to this point for Lifetime and Hallmark and Ion.
Amazing.
And TNT. And we need to have this be number 14 because it stopped at 13 right at the start of the pandemic. And now the 13 is starting to make me nervous.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to happen.
Yes.
It's going to happen. That's cool. And do you go to set?
It depends. It honestly depends who the company is. I started on a film set as a script supervisor, so I really like going to set and I like bringing people coffee carts and just saying hi. But the other thing is I've worked on set and I know that once you turn over the script, it's not yours anymore.
Right. So
I just like to go and say thank you and be there for a day. But I've also had movies shot. I was telling Catherine earlier, one time I only knew it was being shot because an actor found me on Instagram and said, I have a question about what this means. And I was like, oh, you're shooting. That's great. So
yeah,
depends.
I had a short film made of Arranged and I got to be on set for that. And it was really trippy experience because it was like these people that I had invented in my head and this set that really did look like the book and everyone looked and acted like I imagined. And my husband was very nice and it was being shot in Toronto and he came with me to Toronto and he came with me to set. And after an hour, he was like, so can we go? And I was like, no, I need to stay. I'm staying all day.
Don't bring your husband. My husband's just like, have a great day.
Yeah, and he was fine. He's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go do my thing, and which he did. And I was just there the whole day, like, this is awesome. I'm sure that wears off at some point, maybe. But it was really a highlight. And I'm, it's very easy, and it's my personality too, to not pause and celebrate victories, But I did do that, and my screensaver on my phone is still a shot I took on set of the screen that the director looks at.
Video Village.
Okay, Video Village. Thank you. Of the main character of Arranged.
I'm going to put this out there. By the end of 2022, we're going to change that.
Right. We're going to be on another set. Yes, definitely. And we'll be okay to be on sets, right?
Yes. Yes.
Knock on wood. Really.
Knock on wood.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Rachel. It was such a lovely time with both of you. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. Again, we do have signed book plates available.
I matched my sweater to the book.
Yes.
Come on.
I commend your effort. just click on the green purchase button directly below your screen. It'll take you to our website. Just make sure to write signed book plate in the order comments when you're checking out your cart. And for those of you who tuned in late, don't worry, a replay will be available shortly after the broadcast ends. And that covers it. Thank you so much again.
Well, and thank you for hosting this. And I just want to, I mean, obviously I hope you buy my book, but I hope you do buy a book at least from Vroman's. That was
great bookstore.
Great bookstore and nice enough to do this. And, you know, the pandemic, it's been hard for everyone, but in particular bookstores. And, you know, we all want bookstores to go to when this is finally over. So that the easiest way to keep a bookstore into business is to buy books there. So that's my plug for you guys. And
thank you. Yeah, support your independent bookstores, everyone.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Good night, everyone.